Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Lexa Peterson, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Warrant Officer Class 1 Kim Owen. Today we remember the 80th anniversary of the Battle of Sattleberg. Throughout 1943, the war against the Japanese in New Guinea involved much bitter fighting and heavy casualties. Following a campaign over rugged terrain between Wau and Salamua, the Australians captured Lae in September, then continued their advance along the Huon Peninsula. The next objective, Finschhaven, was captured on the 2nd of October. But the Australians soon discovered that the Japanese strongly occupied some key high ground at Sattleberg, only 8 kilometres inland from their landing site and base of supply. This threat could not be ignored. In the middle of October, the Japanese launched a series of attacks against the Australians, who were hard-pressed to hold them off. But on the 21st, with all 3 brigades now present, the Australian 9th Division launched its counterstroke. Steady progress towards Sattleberg was made over the next few weeks. After repelling another fierce enemy counterattack between the 22nd and 23rd of November, the advance resumed. Supported by air power, tanks and artillery, the Australians captured the Sattleberg Heights on the 24th and next day, the 25th, 80 years ago today. The battle ended as surviving Japanese troops abandoned their positions. During the fighting for Sattleberg, the Australians lost 49 men killed and a further 118 wounded. Today, we remember the Battle of Sattleberg. We pay our respects to the men commemorated here on the Roll of Honour and to the survivors who returned home. Shortly, we will hear the story of one who lost his life. This evening, we warmly welcome the delegation representing the Royal Flying Doctor Service. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors to the memorial. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Captain Hugh Francis Treloar. Hugh Treloar was born on the 2nd of February 1917 in the Adelaide suburb of Tranmere. He was the youngest of 4 children born to estate agent Charles Treloar and his wife Maud. Hugh attended Tranmere School and then St Peter's College, where he gained a reputation as a keen sportsman. He went on to find employment as a wool appraiser while serving as a volunteer in the local light horse militia unit. Hugh Treloar was living and working in Adelaide when the Second World War broke out in 1939. Before enlisting, he became engaged to his sweetheart, Miriam Hanson, and they were married at St Ignatius Church in Norwood in early June 1940. A month later, Treloar enlisted in the 2nd Australian Imperial Force. After initial training, he was taken on strength of the 2nd 48th Infantry Battalion and promoted to the rank of corporal. He completed further training at a school for non-commissioned officers in September, before undertaking a rifle course towards the end of the month. In October, he was granted a short period of leave, which he spent at home with his wife, before returning to his unit, where he was promoted to sergeant. Sergeant Treloar embarked for active service on the 17th of November 1940. After a month at sea, he and his comrades disembarked in Palestine. They saw out the remainder of the year training in preparation to fight Axis forces in the Western Desert. In the new year, the 2nd 48th moved to Cyrenaica, but was eventually forced to fall back to Tobruk after the German-led counterattack overwhelmed the Allies' position. Treloar and his comrades entered Tobruk defences on the 9th of April 1941. They would spend the next 8 months besieged, fighting to defend the fortress. Treloar was commissioned to lieutenant and took part in many clashes with the enemy. In September, he was sent to hospital after suffering from jaundice and did not rejoin his unit until November, by which time it had been withdrawn from Tobruk. Back in Palestine, Treloar and his comrades rested and undertook garrison duties and training. Over the following months, Axis forces continued to push the Allies back towards Egypt. By July 1942, they had reached El Alamein, within 70 miles of Alexandria. Treloar and his men were rushed to the Alamein area, where after taking key ground at Tel Alesia, they held the northern sector for 4 months. During this time, the enemy became progressively weaker, and on the 23rd of October, Allied forces launched a major counter-offensive. A few days later, the 2nd 48th attacked a local location called Ring Contour 25, where Treloar was badly wounded in the back and thigh. He was evacuated to hospital for treatment and saw out the rest of the year recovering from his wounds, as well as a bout of malaria. The attack at El Alamein proved successful, turning the tide in favour of the Allies in North Africa. In January 1943, Treloar and his comrades departed the Middle East and began the journey home to Australia. He arrived in Melbourne on the 25th of February and was granted leave to Adelaide to see his family. After his return to duty, the 2nd 48th travelled to Queensland, where it continued training with a focus on fighting in jungle and tropical conditions. By August, Treloar and his comrades were again ready to return to the firing line. They embarked from Cairns in August and in September participated in the 9th Division amphibious landing at Red Beach, northwest of Lae in New Guinea. Treloar was made temporary captain before his unit engaged in fighting against Japanese forces on the Huon Peninsula at locations including Lae and Finschhafen. In November, Treloar and his men were drawn into the fighting around Sattleberg, where a large force of Japanese infantry held the high ground, threatening Australian lines of communication. The fighting to capture this location began on the 17th of November, and the Allied forces made quick progress. Making their way up the tortuous slopes, they were within reach of Sattleberg by the 22nd, when they encountered the enemy in strength on the eastern side of the hill. Withdrawing to regroup, the 2nd 48th was caught off guard when the enemy began shelling its headquarters, where Treloar and 4 other officers were stationed. All 5 men were hit, dying of their wounds within 12 hours. Sattleberg was captured by the 2nd 48th 3 days later. In 1944, Treloar was posthumously mentioned in dispatches for distinguished service in New Guinea. He is buried in Lae War Cemetery beneath the words chosen by his family. "O true and strong and dear, goodbye." Hugh Treloar was 26 years old. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, amongst almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Captain Hugh Francis Treloar, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozieres or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over, but in Australia they'll be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support during the Memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.